On my 70th birthday, everything seemed pleasant. Flowers arranged just right, old songs playing softly, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. But it only took one toast for the ground to disappear beneath my feet. Unfortunately, Aunt won't be receiving any inheritance. My father said she was never really present. It was my niece who said it, in front of everyone. Maybe you felt something like that, as if, after everything you gave, your presence could be erased with a single sentence, as if a whole life could be dismissed with cold judgment. In that moment, my body trembled, but my silence spoke louder. And later that night, flipping through a worn photo album, something found its way to me. What I discovered wasn't just a letter. It was the quiet truth of someone who knew love, even if he never found the words to say it out loud. The room smelled of lilacs and vanilla cake, soft music playing in the background, songs I used to hum while folding laundry. My family had decorated everything just right, the kind of scene you'd find on a postcard. But beneath the surface of every kind gesture, there was a strange quiet, like everyone was performing a play, and I was the only one who hadn't read the script. My niece hugged me with arms that barely touched, her eyes scanning the room more than they looked at me. My brother avoided direct conversation, keeping himself busy with wine glasses and small talk. I tried to smile to absorb the joy they said I deserved, but something inside me tightened with every passing minute. Laughter echoed, but it didn't warm the room. It bounced off the walls, hollow and misplaced. I watched old friends whisper in corners, their eyes flickering toward me and then away. My heart knew what my mind refused to admit. I was being celebrated but not truly seen. The photographs from my childhood were displayed on a side table. Me in pigtails, me holding my baby brother. I stood in front of them longer than I meant to, remembering days of scraped knees and lullabies. Days where presence meant love, not proof. But somehow, here and now, my presence felt like an obligation. And still, I told myself, it's just nerves. It's just age making you sensitive. But deep down, I could feel it coming. The kind of moment that breaks something you didn't even know was fragile. And when the toast began, I knew it had finally arrived. The clinking of glasses signaled the moment everyone had been waiting for. Words of celebration, memories shared, perhaps even laughter. My niece stood confidently at the head of the room, her champagne flute catching the chandelier's light. She smiled as if what she was about to say would warm the room. I leaned forward slightly, hopeful, ready to receive some small tribute, maybe even a thank you, for the years I spent mothering hearts that weren't mine to keep. But what came next didn't feel like words. It felt like an earthquake. Unfortunately, she said, pausing with dramatic weight, Aunt won't be receiving any inheritance. My father said she was never really present. The words rolled out smoothly, as if she were reading a line from a script she'd rehearsed. The room didn't erupt. It froze. The kind of silence that isn't peace, but pure tension. I saw heads turn. I saw eyebrows rise. And I felt every eye fall on me like judgment gaveling down. I sat there, still. Not because I wanted to be composed, but because I didn't know where to place my hands, or how to move a body that suddenly felt like stone. The air around me thickened, like it might choke. My brother, the same boy I stayed up with through nights of fever and fear, sipped his drink without lifting his gaze. No defense. No denial, just silence, like the truth had been spoken, and everyone had already agreed. Images rushed through my mind. Him on my lap, burning with fever, me skipping college parties to stay home and take care of him. The time I sold my necklace to buy his textbooks. Were those things not presents? Or had my version of love been too quiet to be counted? My niece's voice echoed in my ears long after she stopped talking, each syllable slicing into memories I held sacred. I looked down at my lap, at my trembling fingers resting against the soft fabric of my dress. I wanted to scream, to stand up and tell them all what I had sacrificed. But the words didn't come. Instead, I swallowed them, like I had swallowed so many disappointments in my life. And as the room moved on, laughing again, toasting again, I realized I had been erased. Not loudly, but efficiently. But even in that silence, something inside me refused to disappear. I stayed seated, though every fiber in me screamed to run, to vanish before the second glass could clink or the next comment could pierce deeper. But I didn't move. I couldn't. My hands rested politely on my lap, folded like I was in church, praying for a moment that had already passed. Around me, the celebration carried on. Forks scraped plates. Someone turned the music up slightly. And yet, I felt like I was standing in the middle of a spotlight, naked in my shame, my history rewritten by a single, unkind phrase. I caught the eye of a cousin I hadn't seen in years. Her smile faltered. She looked away quickly, pretending to be deeply interested in her wine. That look, brief as it was, confirmed what I feared. They believed it. The sentence had done its job. Not just excluding me from an inheritance, but from belonging. My role in the family, once firm and nurturing, now seemed redefined as distant, absent. And the worst part, no one stood up for me. Not one person questioned it. I wanted to speak, to remind them who I was. But every time I tried to open my mouth, the lump in my throat rose higher. I didn't trust my voice not to crack, not to betray how broken I felt. Instead, I sat in that humiliating silence, trying to hold on to my dignity like it was the last piece of thread in a fraying sweater. The room blurred a little as tears threatened, but I blinked them away. If they were going to call me absent, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Memories floated through me like old photographs. Christmas mornings I hosted, birthdays I never missed, late-night phone calls when no one else picked up. Were they all invisible now? Had my love been so soft, so constant, that it was no longer recognized? I thought of my brother, wondered what had changed in him, what had hardened over time. Or maybe he had always believed this, and I just refused to see it. Someone passed by and laid a hand on my shoulder, light and brief, like pity disguised as affection. I nodded, smiling faintly, but my heart was thundering. I knew I wouldn't be able to endure the whole evening. Something inside me had shifted, slow, quiet, but irreversible. And later that night, I would find the only voice that still remembered who I truly was. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I stood in the dark for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. It was a different kind of silence than the one at the party. This one wasn't heavy with judgment. It was familiar, like an old friend holding space for my pain. I slipped off my shoes and padded barefoot through the living room, every step echoing louder in the quiet house. The scent of lavender from the candles I lit earlier in the day still lingered, soft and bittersweet. I found myself drifting toward the old bookshelf, the one no one else ever touched. My fingers, as if guided by something deeper than thought, pulled out the faded leather-bound photo album that had followed me from house to house for decades. It creaked as I opened it, pages slightly stuck together from time and use. The first image was of me at 9, missing a front tooth, cradling my baby brother on our mother's porch. He was wrapped in a yellow blanket I had picked out with my allowance money. I smiled, despite everything. Page after page, the years unfolded like a movie I'd forgotten I was in. Summer camps I paid for, graduation photos I had framed, hospital, rooms I slept in without question. The tears came slowly, one by one, trailing down my face without drama. I didn't sob. I just leaked. My presence had been written in these pages. My sacrifices, unspoken but visible. How could they say I was never there when I had been the shadow behind every single light in his life? I paused on a photo tucked loosely between 2 pages. A candid one. Us on a hike, both squinting into the sun. Behind it, something slipped out. A folded piece of yellowed paper I didn't recognize. My breath caught as I unfolded it, the edges soft with time. It was his handwriting, my brother's. Uneven, rushed, but unmistakable. My name was at the top. Maninha, it began. The nickname he hadn't used in years. My fingers trembled. I read on. And as I read, something inside me cracked. Not with pain, but with something else. Something closer to understanding. The words were clumsy, but real. They carried the weight of a truth long buried. And suddenly, I saw everything differently. Because in that letter, he told the story no one else had the courage to speak aloud. Maninha, I never said it out loud, but thank you. The first line already pressed into my chest like a warm stone. My brother's words were raw, unpolished, like they'd been scribbled in a moment of confession, hidden before he could regret the softness. He wrote about the nights I stayed with him during his fevers, how he used to pretend to be asleep just to feel my hand on his forehead. He admitted he pushed people away back then. Everyone. Except me. You were always there, he wrote, even when I made it hard to love me. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, and the weight of his silence over the years began to shift. Maybe he didn't say those words at the party because he never could. Maybe he allowed others to speak on his behalf out of habit, out of fear. But this letter, it was his voice, unfiltered by time or resentment. You were my home in silence, he wrote. That line hit me the hardest, because it was true. I had built that home for him, quietly, patiently, without ever asking for rent. As I read, the room seemed to fall away. There was no party, no niece, no clinking glasses. Just me and the ghost of a boy I once carried through. Childhood, I thought of all the moments he probably wanted to say something, but didn't know how. All the times I sat beside him while he processed grief, failure, heartbreak, saying nothing but staying still. Maybe that was my greatest gift to him. And maybe he finally saw it. The final lines were what undid me. I pushed the world away, but you never left. I owe you more than I ever said. I love you, always. Simple, imperfect, but true. I clutched the letter to my chest, letting the tears come freely now. Not out of sadness, but release. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgotten. My love had not vanished into nothingness. It had simply gone unspoken. Until now. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the letter in my lap, the photo album open beside me, and a kind of peace growing inside. Not loud or triumphant, just still. Like a sea finally calming after a storm. And with the sunrise, I knew exactly what I had to do. Morning light slipped through the curtains, casting long golden lines across the floor. I hadn't slept, but I didn't feel tired. Something had shifted in me overnight, like a bone finally snapping into place after being misaligned for years. I moved with a steadiness I hadn't felt in a long time. No rush, no panic. Just purpose. I made tea the way I always did, letting the kettle whistle fill the silence that used to ache. Today, that quiet felt like mine. I took my time getting dressed, choosing a soft navy blouse and pearl earrings my brother gave me once, long before life built the wall between us. I ironed my skirt, applied a touch of blush. Not for them, but for me. I was returning to that hall not to reclaim a spot at their table, but to show that I had never truly left. I folded the letter carefully, slipping it into my purse like a sacred artifact. My hands didn't shake this time. The drive was short, but memory made it stretch. I passed the bakery where I once bought his favorite lemon bars after his college acceptance. The park bench where we sat the day he told me about his first heartbreak. These were landmarks of love no one else could see. And yet, they anchored me. When I pulled into the venue parking lot, my heart thumped steadily. Not with fear, but resolve. Inside, the cleanup had begun. Balloons deflated, plates half cleared. Laughter from the night before now faded into echoes. A few family members lingered, chatting over leftover cake. When they saw me, the room shifted again, this time in confusion. I walked past their puzzled glances, my eyes focused on the small table where my niece sat with her phone in hand, and my brother beside her, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. I placed the letter gently on the table in front of them. "Before anyone writes me out of this family," I said, voice calm but firm, "read what your father wrote when no one was watching." I didn't raise my tone. I didn't need to. The words, like the letter, carried weight enough. And in that moment, they had no choice but to see me. Not the version they created, but the one he remembered. They didn't reach for the letter right away. My niece blinked, clearly unsure if this was some sort of confrontation or a misunderstanding. My brother looked at the folded paper as if it might burn his fingers. For a second, I wondered if they'd refuse to read it, if they'd dismiss even this, the last quiet truth I had to give. But something in my expression must have held them there, because slowly, he picked it up. His eyes scanned the page, and with each line I saw the facade begin to crack. He didn't say a word, but his grip on the letter tightened. My niece leaned in to read over his shoulder, her brows furrowed, lips pressed together. When they reached the end, the room felt smaller, tighter. No one moved, no one dared speak. I stood tall, not out of pride, but necessity. For years I had folded myself to fit inside their expectations, quiet, supportive, invisible. But not today. Today I existed in full. "I never needed applause," I said, my voice soft but unwavering. "But I won't be erased. Not after everything. I didn't list the sacrifices. I didn't need to defend the decades I spent holding this family together, like thread in a torn quilt. The letter did what words never could. It reminded them that even silence has a history, and that my silence had always been full of love." My brother finally looked at me. His eyes were wet, not with drama, but the quiet ache of recognition. Maybe regret, maybe shame. But I didn't need an apology. Not anymore. I had lived my life with love, and I had the proof in his own handwriting. He opened his mouth, then closed it. And that was enough. Sometimes the absence of denial is the loudest confession. I turned to leave, my heels clicking against the cold floor. I didn't need to stay. They had seen what they needed to see. I passed the table with the half-eaten cake and the crumpled napkins, the dying balloons, and the tired decorations. This party had tried to define me in absence, but I had rewritten the ending. And as I reached the door, I realized I had never stood taller than I did in that goodbye. The air outside was cooler than I remembered, crisp and biting in a way that woke me up from the inside out. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and breathed in deeply, letting the chill cleanse the last of the party from my lungs. Each step toward my car felt like shedding a layer of someone else's version of me. The absent aunt, the irrelevant sister, the woman they only remembered when it was convenient. That woman stayed behind in that hall. I drove away in silence, but this time the quiet wasn't heavy. It was mine. At home, I lit a candle in the kitchen, the same one I always lit when waiting for someone to come home. Only this time, I wasn't waiting. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the late afternoon stretch across the sky in soft golds and blues. I felt no bitterness, just clarity. Some truths take a lifetime to rise to the surface, and when they do, they don't need to scream. They simply sit beside you like old friends, asking nothing but to be seen. I didn't tell anyone else about the letter. I didn't post it, I didn't photocopy it, and I didn't frame it. It wasn't meant to be a weapon or a shield. It was something more sacred than that, a quiet affirmation that I had loved well, even if the world forgot to notice. And in that understanding, I found peace deeper than applause could ever offer. My value didn't live in their memories. It lived in the life I had lived, in the details, in the devotion, in the pages no one thought to read. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I returned the letter to its resting place inside the photo album. I paused on one last picture. My brother, mid-laugh, holding a birthday cake I had baked him when he turned 20. There was icing on his chin and joy in his eyes. That moment was real, and it was enough. I didn't need anything more than that memory to remind me. I had been present, deeply, quietly, and always. I turned off the lights, brushed my hand across the spine of the album and whispered, "I remember, and maybe, just maybe," that was all I ever needed to say. Because some legacies aren't written in wills. They're written in love that never had to raise its voice. It's strange how a single piece of paper can restore years of self-worth. That letter didn't change the past. It didn't erase the pain or undo the coldness that fell between me and my family. But it gave shape to something I'd always felt, but could never prove. That I mattered, that I loved deeply, and that my love was seen, even if the words came late. Sometimes the most important truths aren't shouted in crowds. They're whispered in private, folded between memories, waiting patiently to be found. I began noticing small changes after that day. Not from them, but in me. I smiled more when I looked in the mirror. I called old friends without worrying whether they'd call back. I wore my favorite colors again, lavenders and dusty blues, and lit candles not out of longing, but gratitude. I no longer felt the urge to defend my past. I had lived it. I had loved through it. And now I was finally walking beside it, not beneath it. I started writing letters of my own, not for others to read, but for myself, to remember, to honor, to heal. I wrote about my childhood, my brother, the quiet sacrifices, and the secret joys. I wrote until the ink ran out and the pages piled high. Because stories, when left untold, don't disappear. They wait. And now, I was ready to let them breathe. The world outside didn't change, but my world did. And maybe that's enough. I no longer feel erased. I feel present, fully, in the echo of old songs, in the scent of morning coffee, in the feel of soft blankets folded at the edge of my bed. My presence is no longer something I need to prove. It's something I carry, gently, with pride. So if you're listening, and you've ever felt like you've vanished in someone else's story, I hope you find your letter too. Or better yet, write one for yourself. Where are you watching from? Tell me your city and age in the comments. And if this story reminded you of something you've lived, share it with someone who needs to feel remembered. And don't forget to subscribe. The next story might be the one that finds you.